On my main channel, you can see the piece of paper that I have here just to the right of me. You probably can't see it on this channel because I crop out the video, but it's a certificate from a training program I did for hostile environments. I have been all over the world. I have been to dangerous places. I have been to Morocco. Morocco is a hell of a story. But this story's been going around for a while, and I'm not going to talk directly about what happened in Morocco, just that a couple of Scandinavian women were murdered, essentially. And the latest from Reuters, more arrests made over murder of 2 Scandinavian women in Morocco. I'll just read a little bit of this, and then the purpose of this video is I want to talk about the dangers of the world. And for some reason, you know, look, I myself am a liberal, but most of my liberal friends don't seem to understand that they live in a protected bubble, that the American borders provide them with extreme levels of security that don't exist in most places of the world. They say 19 people have been arrested in the wake of the murder of 2 Scandinavian women last week in Morocco's Atlas Mountains, a security source familiar with the case said on Monday. They include the 4 main suspects in the crime and 15 other people accused of having connections to the alleged killers, the source told Reuters, without giving further details. Louisa Vesterager Jespersen, 24 from Denmark, and Maren Ueland, 28 from Norway, were found dead early on December 17th near the village of Imlil, en route to Toubkal, North Africa's highest peak and a popular hiking and trekking destination. The 4 main suspects, aged between 25 and 30, had pledged allegiance to the Islamic State in a video made 3 days before the bodies were found, but without agreeing this in advance with any foreign group, police and domestic intelligence spokesman Boubker Sabik said on the state 2M TV channel Sunday. He described the men as lone wolves. So, you know, they basically, there's a little bit more details, but here's the thing. Let me tell you a story about Morocco. I went to an event and it was in Marrakesh. When I was leaving the event, I had a flight very early in the morning, so it was like 3 or 4 a.m. when I called the cab. The cab was a very, very old car. I don't know what year it was, but it was old. And it didn't have, you know, it doesn't have the card swipe thing like you'd expect. No, it was cash. It was a cash cab. I'm in the cab, heading to the airport, and the dude is flying like 60 miles an hour down side streets, blowing every street light. And I put my seatbelt on. I'm like, hey man, you know, we're in Morocco. It's not like we're in the United States here. And the guy, when we started pulling up to the airport, he basically said that he had to do that because gangs roam the streets and wait for you to slow down to try and rob you. So it's better to just fly as fast as possible. He was trying to keep me safe by, you know, doing what he did. And it felt very dangerous. But I realized, you know, this is what these places are like. When I was transferring through, I believe I transferred through Casablanca into Marrakesh. So I flew internationally, landed in Casablanca, then went to Marrakesh. In the airport, when I was transferring from my flight to the domestic flight, I entered a part of the airport where the lights were all broken, the walls were ripped apart, and I kid you not, it looked like an abandoned building. And I thought maybe I walked down the wrong corridor because I'm used to Europe, I'm used to America, I'm Japan. You know, these places that I've been to, even Turkey, they're very nice and well maintained. And here I was in a place where the airport itself was falling apart, and I thought I was in an abandoned building when all of a sudden a European-looking businessman was walking up from the direction I came and just gave me a nod and kept walking. And I'm like, must be the right way. It turned out it was, because the airport wasn't well maintained. This is the reality for a lot of countries that aren't safe, like Europe, like America. When I was in Brazil, one of the stories I often tell is about I was in the favelas, right? These are the shanty towns, and they couldn't flush their toilets because they didn't have running water. Or I should say they're now building the infrastructure. They were getting to that point, but it was limited. So the family would just all use the toilet and leave their waste in a pile. This is the reality for a lot of the world. And what happens is there are people in the US who grow up in these safety bubbles, who don't understand how dangerous things can really be. What happens is then you get 2 women who go to Morocco and this tragedy happens. Look, they should be able to go on these treks. People should be able to be safe and travel the world. The reality is, there are bad people on this planet. And you live in America, you live in Europe, wherever you live, if you live in one of these places, you maybe just don't realize how truly terrifying things can really be. Because I've been to these places. I haven't been to the worst places. You know, I haven't been to Syria or anything like that. But I have been to places where the government is basically can't enforce things. I've been in neighborhoods that are considered to be separate from the state. And I have seen just how the law works in places like this. You recognize that going there, you might just die and there's nothing that can be done to save you. In Egypt, I watched people die. Because it happens. But in the US, these things shock people. Sure, we have tragedies here in the US, don't get me wrong. But is there a story like this where someone went hiking in the US and they got kidnapped and a video was made where they were beheaded? It just doesn't happen. I have another story that I want to talk about from the Daily Mail. Terrifying moment. Mexican hitmen filmed themselves ambushing and shooting dead 4 police officers with machine guns. They say video emerged showing Mexican hitmen ambushing police officers with machine guns, killing 4. The deadly shooting took place on October 28th in Almoloya de, my Spanish is terrible, Alquiciras, a municipality 85 miles southwest of Mexico City. Now, I'm not going to play the video for obvious reasons, but it's not the only example of just how truly dangerous the world is. And I think because, I'll say this. I think when you hear stories about these women who went hiking in Morocco, it is a popular place. It's not like this happens all the time. But you have to recognize you're not going to be safe out here in the middle of nowhere. I think these stories lend credence to the idea that it often is these liberal types, and I'm not trying to disparage liberals. Like my friends, I have friends who are liberal who fully understand the world is dangerous. But it tends to be these types who are like lovey-dovey, the world is great, who think they can go out into these places and then bad things end up happening. Then it's no surprise that many of these people are all about open borders. They don't want border security. And it's fascinating to me when you see people like Chuck Schumer, who 9 years ago was advocating for building a border wall, who's now saying there's not going to be a wall. And it's like, look, if Bernie Sanders, Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, all of these Democrats, not even 10 years ago, were advocating, or around 10 years ago, were specifically advocating for border security. What happened? What changed? It says to me that these people just have no integrity. They don't have principles. And then what ends up happening is, because they're just trying to pander to a demographic of people who are all lovey-dovey and hand-holding, who don't know how dangerous things can truly be, they say, sure, we'll give the people what they want, we'll reduce security. And then we have story after story about illegal immigrants committing crimes or hurting people. And look, one of the other frustrating things to me about this argument over illegal immigrant crime is that people assume the left will play the argument that, oh, but illegal immigrants commit less crime. Okay, great, fine, that's fine. I'm not arguing that. Okay, I'm arguing that we shouldn't even have a debate. Tell that mother in Florida whose son was killed by an illegal immigrant that it doesn't matter because illegal immigrants commit less crime. That's not going to make her feel better. Because the issue is, if someone who came in here illegally was prevented from coming in here, her son would still be alive. Often people try to shift the argument into a statistics game. No, we're talking about individual circumstances. Should we reduce crime across the board? Of course we should. Should we stop gang crime in Chicago and drug violence in the Southwest? Yes, absolutely. Should we stop violent criminals who have been deported from coming back into the country? Yes, we should. It's the same thing that they do with the argument over the border wall. They say, oh, the wall won't prevent all illegal immigration, so what's the point? It's like, well, that's not the argument. The argument is the wall will work. The wall will keep people out. If you want to argue if the cost is worth it, that's the argument. But the idea that simply because there's a greater statistical reason to do something else doesn't mean we shouldn't take care of other problems. So look, if you want to make an argument about the wall or about illegal immigration, you need to focus on those stories and not focus on greater statistics. I'll tell you another story. What kind of influences me to make me more, social, more center left than anything is that I lived in Florida. I lived in the Redlands area, and it was about a couple months of me having lived there, and I'm like 30 or 40 minutes drive away from any police department. When I saw a flashlight in my backyard, there was someone there. I have an air compression, 22 pellet rifle, and I cracked it, empty, and fired. And the light turned off and the person ran away. My friends and I were realizing that if we needed to call the police, they wouldn't come. We were on our own. And I think this is why there's a big difference between liberals and conservatives. For people who live in rural places, which most conservatives they don't live in big cities, they probably recognize that when it comes to danger, you can't rely on it is about you solving your problem. And it's also about realizing that the danger exists. But people who live in big cities have police and ambulances and fire departments within a moment's notice. But the most important thing when it comes to the issue of border security and the world being dangerous and why we need to take care of each other, was that my neighbors told me, they gave me a warning, that there had been a string of home invasions in the area because, look, they can't do anything about it. And the police in this area, they don't have CSI. You get killed, it's end of story. And somebody was killed. There was a home invasion, a guy was killed, and apparently the dudes who did it happened to have been illegal immigrants. What do you think happens to that community then? And this is a mostly Latino community. They say, get these people out of here, man. Okay? Telling them that statistically illegal immigrants aren't committing most crime isn't changing the fact that there are home invasions happening in their neighborhood and they're asking you to do something about this problem. They're not saying other problems aren't worse. But this lends itself to, it's a bigger conversation. Obviously, I'm not going to put together a PowerPoint. There's a lot to talk about here, but I am not surprised when I hear, the left saying, oh, we shouldn't worry about this. Yeah, you're not in the communities that are affected by this. I'm not surprised that when I hear about these lovey-dovey progressives who go for bike rides to the Middle East and get, have these things happen to them. It's unfortunate, but this is how the world really is. Now, I can say for the right, a lot of people on the right overestimate the amount of, violence and how bad things really are. Like Sweden's a really great example. Is Sweden experiencing more crime than it experienced in the past? It is. But it's nowhere near the level of crime the U.S. has experienced. So what happens is people who experience the crime here, they think if people are saying it's bad there, they're basing it off of their perspective of their community. When in reality, look, I can recognize Sweden has its problems. The crime is getting worse, but it's dramatically safer than most cities in the United States. So I think that's the point. Ultimately, the final point I'll make is that liberals live in these big cities where the police are within a few minutes, where there's an ambulance, a fire department, where your neighbors are witnesses, and they feel safe because of this. And then what happens is they assume everything is like this, everything is safe. And these tragedies happen because they don't realize just how truly dangerous the world is. And then the inverse for the conservatives, they assume things are much more dangerous because they live in areas where they gotta take care of themselves. So anyway, look, long story short, there are stories that come up where I just frequently want to talk about how the world truly is a dangerous place, and I feel like the left just doesn't seem to understand that. And again, I think conservatives might overestimate it, but for the most part, better safe than sorry. It is better to assume the dangers exist than to end up in one of these dangerous situations. So anyway, stick around, I got more videos coming up, and I will see you in a few minutes.